Hello, we're back for another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. It is a pleasure to have Rick Nariani here with us today, founder of Wanted. Going to learn all about the platform, how you could be shopping for footwear, how you could be finding rare exclusives. Ricky, excited to have you on here today.
What's going on, Jason? Nice to be on. And by the way, we don't call it footwear; we call them sneakers. We're calling them sneakers, not tennis shoes. Sneakers, streetwear, et cetera, et cetera.
Strictly sneakers. That's the focus. Love the background behind you. For any audio listeners as well, too. Great showcase of sneakers behind Ricky here. And Ricky, how did you get into the world of sneakers? I've loved our discussions around your background and the path. Where did it all start for you?
Yeah, so my dad was a taxi driver. You know, we grew up in relatively poor minority communities. And sneakers were just one of the few things we were allowed to have. You know, we didn't have nice cars, we didn't have nice houses, but every now and then Dad would buy you those pair of Jordans, and that meant the world to us. So I remember getting my first pair of Air Force Ones, I think it was like 88. I got my Reebok pumps in 89, 90. Year that is, so it's been in this for a while, and I never looked back. It's been a passion of mine since then.
Love it. Love it. Bringing back memories for me of my first pair of Jordans, and, you know, could tell how much of an impact it had on you, but you didn't go directly into the sneaker world from a business, from a career standpoint.
No, I didn't. Right. I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, I had to support my family. I had to support my parents, and sneakers wouldn't allow me to do that. So I went, I worked in the oil industry for several years, put myself through college, did an MBA, and worked in finance for a number of years. So prior to actually starting Wanted, I was in the corp dev team at IBM, doing mergers and acquisitions, particularly in AI and blockchain. And then prior to that, I was doing corporate strategy at a number of different Fortune 500 companies. So before I got here and started my own company, I kind of maneuvered through the world of corporate America, from oil and gas to sustainability, strategy, and M&A, and then realized, 2 years ago that, hey, look, I want to go follow my passions now.
Amazing. And I think that resonates with a lot of listeners as well, too, where, you have your corporate path, finance, oil and gas, M&A, you're successful, you're good at it, but then you start looking at other areas where you want to have an impact, other passions that you would love to be more involved in on a day-to-day basis. When did that moment occur for you?
It's the answer to this question is probably not what most people are going to like to hear.
Okay.
For the better part of 20 years, I wanted to work for Nike. It was like my life dream. As a collector of Jordans, my entire life, I wanted to work at Nike. And as I was interviewing at Nike and also Adidas, and I was meeting a lot of these senior executives, it dawned on me that minorities and people of color were severely underrepresented in the industry. Black, Asian, Hispanic, people of color in general, we make up 60% of the buying demographic, yet we make up less than 5% of senior executives at these major brands. So that really bothered me. So as I was sitting here, my life dream to go work at one of these brands, I'm like, well, hang on a second. I think there's an opportunity here that we can build something for ourselves. And that was really when I saw the opportunity. Was not only that there was a problem for us to go solve, and I can talk about that here in a second, but for me as a person of color coming from a poor minority community, it was like, wow, I want to go build something where I can start to hire from these communities and give back a little bit, and also be a story wherein people can say, look at Rick. He didn't just go be a doctor or lawyer or engineer. He went and followed his passions. He started a sneaker company, and now he's made it. Haven't made it yet, but I wanted to be that story. So it was around 2.5 years ago, when I was really going through these final interviews at Nike and Adidas, I realized that I wanted to go build something for myself. That was on the personal motivation side. But the other side of it was I was a sneaker reseller. I was selling, I think by 2019, I had done, God, I hope the IRS isn't watching. I had sold about $1 million of sneakers out of my living room in 2019, 2018. And, there was GOAT, StockX, eBay. You had all these secondary marketplaces. And there was just a ton of friction in the experience, both for buyers and sellers. So that's when I realized, like, oh, wow, there's an opportunity here to kind of be this control point, build this platform that aggregates data, allows you to manage inventory, check prices, kind of what I call the Expedia of sneakers. That was the first iteration of the product. And I realized there was an opportunity for that, just to kind of remove friction and streamline the experience for both buyers and sellers. So that was around 2.5 years ago when I realized that, and it was coming to head with me interviewing at all these companies and realizing that I wanted to go build something. Sorry, long answer to a short question.
Perfect answer. You're looking at the landscape. You're currently a reseller. You understand the opportunities in the industry. You're already interviewing at Nike, Adidas, but then realize, hey, there's something off here, and I want to become an entrepreneur in this space, a space where 60% of the consumers are representing 5% under of senior management. And I want to be able to, be a leader here. I want to be able to hire accordingly. And I see all of these areas that need solutions, particularly around friction from buyers to sellers. There's all different types of evolutions that could occur here right now, and we're going to do it.
Right. And look, there was, one of our advisors always says, if you're going to build something, make sure that the user experience is transformational, not incremental, especially when you're treading slightly red water, where you have a lot of market incumbents and you're trying to disrupt the experience to some extent. And what we saw was that, yes, there was an opportunity to be transformational here, not just an incremental thing, because you're fighting with consumer muscle mass as well, or muscle memory. So we saw the opportunity and said, hey, look, let's go build.
Part of why I love working in the startup mid-market space is because it's concepts that are new, that are different. I haven't heard that said exactly like that before, of go for transformational, not incremental. Big fan of it. Hearing about some of your market testing, which we'll talk about later with the test optimized scale questions. I was really a fan of your approaches in our initial discussions as well too. So being able to have that at the core, the essence of your product, of doing transformational things, and how no other groups in the space are really doing it from my vision, from my understanding. I imagine that's why you've been able to get such a strong response from your target audiences, and without even investing into marketing, build up a substantial user base.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. We are a Y-Combinator company, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like we had this all figured out from day one. I mean, these are things that we kind of learned. I'm a first-time founder. I'd never launched a mobile app company, let alone written a single line of code in my life. I'm a finance guy. And some of the things that we learned were, building things that don't scale, right? What is product market fit? What are some of the metrics that you would look at to determine whether you have product market fit? And after what amount of time do you believe it's not a mirage and you actually have, this elusive PMF or product market fit? And at which point then do you start spending money on marketing? So again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like we had it all figured out. These were things that we kind of had to learn the hard way. And I think what's going to be interesting for founders, especially in today's world, where capital isn't as easy to raise as it was 2 or 3 years ago, you're going to have to be really smart with how you spend money, be thoughtful around where you allocate resources, build things that don't scale, figure out what works, have your metrics, double down when you feel you've got something. These are all the things that we had to learn kind of the hard way.
Learning from experience versus, articles on mobile apps or anything like that. Even hearing from other founders, which could give you shortcuts, and many ways is what we look to do here on the platform, on the show. But learning from that experience, from that conditioning, is the ultimate. You were mentioning metrics there. How did you formulate your initial goals in terms of numbers? How did those get corrected over time?
Yeah, I mean, first, like, and this was just, stupid founder mistakes early on, is that you're looking at a feature and you're going, oh, let me measure that feature. And then you've got all these little different things that you've built and you're measuring whether or not they get used and if people are retaining. But then when you step back, you're like, what are we? Right? What really moves the needle? We were looking at user journeys and figuring out how many times people were clicking on that button and if they were doing this or doing that. At the end of the day, we were a marketplace. And the only thing that mattered to us was transaction volume. How many transactions were put through the platform at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, right? So that was really it. I mean, we went from measuring, 15, 20 different metrics around how many times did people check prices in the app, to how many pairs of sneakers were scanned in, how many news articles were read. End of the day, none of that mattered. It all boiled down to, did they or did they not transact? Right? How many transactions were put through the platform? And again, that was something that we had to learn kind of the hard way. And I, as I talk to a lot of founders today, they do tend to overcomplicate metrics, right? It's really a lot simpler than you think. What is it that your business does at its core, and what are the one or two things that you need to do to measure that? For us, being a marketplace, it was simple. How many transactions are put through the platform? And when you dig one level deeper as a marketplace, you've got buyers, you've got sellers. Are buyers retaining? How often are buyers coming back? What's their average order value? Similarly with sellers, how much are sellers selling their items for? How many items are they selling? Are they making profits, right? But at the top, it was transaction volume. All of these are little metrics that feed the bigger metric at the top.
Transaction volume, value attached to both buyers, sellers, looking to get that daily active user, let alone monthly active user. And how did that have an impact on product development? Because I know you guys are broadcasting with what I would call different influencers, I imagine different sellers, on a regular basis. Was that all happening right out of the gate? Were you getting this feedback and then determining where you were going to go from there? What did that timeline look like?
Yeah. So again, this was the whole build things that don't scale, right? The first iteration of the product, like I mentioned, was just this inventory management tool where you could scan your sneakers in, it would bring in prices and data. And what we learned was that, oh, wow, we have a lot of collectors and resellers joining the platform and we're turfing them over the fence to GOAT, StockX, eBay. We then realized, oh, wow, why don't we try to keep those users on Wanted? So the next version of the product was essentially bare bones marketplace functionality where people could just buy and sell. But what ended up happening was we had just created a really dumb bare bones version of StockX. And I'm like, okay, well, we're not going to compete with a $4 billion company. What can we do that's different? And around the same time, and again, another lesson is, build code, talk to users, build code, launch, talk to users. So we built this thing, we launched it, we're talking to users, and users are saying, well, no, I'm not going to sell with you guys or buy with you guys because I can just go to StockX and go. But what we're hearing from sellers is, hey, we don't like being an anonymous party on the other side of a paywall. Buyers are telling us we're increasingly uncomfortable with the number of counterfeits that are in the space today, and we kind of want to know who we're buying from, not just an anonymous entity on the other side of the paywall. And as we're getting this feedback, we're like, oh, social selling, right? Let's kind of create a trusted playground where buyers can know sellers and sellers can know their buyers and give them the tools that they need to transact. And that then led to kind of the next iteration of our product, which was social selling, essentially creating live commerce functionality where sellers or influencers can come on camera and sell inventory. We give them branded marketplaces. So for example, you, Jason, could have your own store where you could sell sneakers directly to people. And now we're launching into the next version of the product where we're trying to streamline the seller experience. So that's really kind of how we've driven the product and improved by just like listening to users, talking to users, and getting a sense for where the opportunities are.
Build code, talk to users. From there, realizing, hey, as great and large as these other platforms are, there's actually missing elements to it. I know I've gone through that thought process myself for different categories. watches, other types of products, but what about counterfeiting? Who am I really buying from?
Right.
So through your live series, you're able to put a platform together for sellers, relatedness, all different types of things coming out of it. I know you guys are at the forefront of thought leadership with the blogs, the articles that are coming out, and I imagine you are getting partnership requests right and left from sellers, possibly from brands, from other marketplaces. Seems like a good space to be in.
It's a good space to be in, but these things can be a distraction, right?
Okay.
Especially as a startup, you got to figure out, I call it return on invested calories. Like, where am I actually going to go invest my time and effort, and what's it going to yield for me? Again, that metric that I talked about earlier, is it going to drive transactions on the platform? Some of these are really nice partnerships that give us credibility, but do they really give us right to win? Are they actually going to move the needle for us? So we do get a lot of partnership inquiries, and I do entertain them because I'm always just curious to hear what people have to say and what some of these deal structures could be. And it is a good place to be in, but at the same time, I'm weary of the distractions that these things can cause.
And like you said, metrics and back to transactions, volume, size, as the actual measurement instead of just flashy lights. This would be cool. What could we do with
Right.
these guys? What is it physically driving? What's the value it's producing for all sides of the table?
Right. Look, and I'll be super honest, right? I think some of the other startups that came into this space around the same time we did got, lured in by some of those flashy lights and some of those flashy logos and letterheads, and ended up, probably wasting time torching cash, whereas they should have been focused on building code, launching product, talking to users, figuring out if you have product market fit. It was all about, hey, this flashy thing, let's go do an event, let's do this or that, and I'm not sure if it worked out for them. So I mean,
Sure.
we made some mistakes too. I'm not going to pretend like we had it all figured out, but we were able to kind of learn and pivot quickly.
That's where that real growth comes from. And I always preach that closed loop, not just guessing, hey, what would be nice for our audiences? What do we think they want? But let's actually hear it directly from them, well, whether it's pretty or not, and then build around that. So the fact that you guys were able to do that, the fact that you were focused on actual revenue numbers,
Mhm.
definitely, I imagine attributed to why you guys are here, why you're growing, and
Mhm.
why other groups are, as you're politely putting, not in that same trajectory.
And I'm really, over the last few weeks, and I'm not sure when people will view this, but where we are, in kind of winter, spring 2023, I'm quite nervous that the environment for startup founders has changed, right? Whereas we had the ability to kind of learn from our mistakes, we fell on our face, we stood up, we're able to raise a little bit more capital. We kept burn low, we kept the team pretty lean, right? Because we knew that, in order to move quickly, build quickly, we had to keep a small team, but we were given the benefit of allowing ourselves to have mistakes. We were allowed to fall on our face, and I do fear that startups, 2023 and onwards, are not going to have some of that benefit. That they're going to have to thread the needle, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult than it was for us.
Sure. And as you said,
Yeah.
Y-Combinator, or likely other options, and you chose that. Capital is different these days. Market testing is different these days. It is, a thinner net,
Yeah.
more narrow for founders and getting it right. But you're saying our ability to test things out, see stuff work, see stuff not work. It wasn't all perfect, but then be able to double down on what was really driving for us has made all the difference.
Right. 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 Absolutely.
Now, in terms of that testing, like to ask guests, from what you've learned from the path that you've been down, I look at marketing, entrepreneurship, overall growth as a series of tests. What would you recommend for the next founder to test out, to incorporate into their own model?
That's a really good question. Um, I think number one is, and by the way, there's no there's no clear answer to this. It's a layer cake of a couple of different things, right? I'd say number one, as a founder, is just have deep subject matter expertise in the problem statement you're trying to solve for, right? Only then can you truly understand what the user experience needs to be, where the pain points actually are, and what to go and then build. But then, as I mentioned earlier, build quickly, test cheaply, and iterate, right? We kept our team low, we kept our burn low, we built things that didn't scale, right? We, for every button that you saw or every feature that you saw, believe that there was 5 guys pushing emails and PDFs and staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning behind the scenes to make it work. But we had metrics. We knew what we were looking to see move, transaction volume, right? Were users retaining? Are users coming back? Are sellers retaining? How much are they selling? What's their profit margins looking like, right? Having those metrics to then figure out, okay, do we actually have product market fit, right? And we made the mistake early on of thinking we actually had product market fit, but it was a mirage, right? And then we had to go back to the drawing board a little bit. So, some of the things that I tell founders today is, A, be passionate about what you're building, right? If you're not willing to sacrifice your work-life balance, your bank account, some personal relationships that you might have, I've got a very angry wife, maybe it's not the right space or vertical for you, but be passionate about what you're building, stay lean, keep burn low, know your metrics, and really strive for that product market fit. Build things that don't scale, and constantly test, right? Like, don't be scared to pivot. We've pivoted now. This is probably going to be our 3rd pivot, maybe 4th pivot, you can argue, right? So don't be scared to pivot and realize when things aren't working, change it. It's never too late to change. And those would be the things that I would encourage founders to test.
Absolutely. And back to that, subject matter expertise, back to the listening in that space, right, and hearing how things change in the conversation to be able to have that relevance and on an ongoing basis. Things were different in 2020, 2022, 2023. We're still figuring it out, but absolutely feeling the change. And I think everyone's, on their toes, watching what's going to be happening later this year. There's different concerns that I hear commonly from founders. So being able to have those shifts, you've already done 3 pivots. You've looked at what metrics really matter, not just the mirage. When you're talking about pivots and move into optimization, not everything works out of the gate. I rarely see things that do. And even when that occurs, you want to optimize, you want to refine. How do you guys go about pivots? You mentioned some of the late nights, whiteboard meetings. What's the best way to approach those improvements?
Yeah, well, first off, it's talking to your users and making sure you're pivoting in the right direction, right? You can pivot into the ditch, or you can pivot off the freeway onto a side road and come back onto the freeway, right? You want to make sure you're pivoting onto concrete. Don't pivot off the road. So what I would say is, make sure you have a good team, right? Really understand the space, know your metrics, know what you're trying to solve for. We weren't going to go be a fintech company, right? Oh, wow, sneakers aren't working. Goat and StockX are eating our lunch. Let's go build a fintech company. That wasn't going to be a pivot for us. It was really, okay, what have we built? What do we know that is working? And in talking to our users, what is it that they want? What is it that they need? Right. And sometimes, we had to kind of come to terms with the fact that users don't know what they want, right? They know the problem that they want to go away, but they don't necessarily know how they want that problem to be solved. So, being creative, thinking outside the box, it was a lot of late nights, looking at user feedback, looking at user journeys, looking at data, understanding what we could be, where the blue ocean is, right? Do we want to be $1 billion business, or do we just want to be a $10-15 million a year business that's comfortable for a couple of founders to make a decent paycheck, right? What's defensible? What's going to be a model that allows us to exist 5-10 years down the road? So as we're thinking about the pivot, it was really looking at all of these things, like what have we built? What resources are available to us? What's the team like? What are our users saying? What do we actually want to be? Do we want to be a unicorn? Do we want to be just a small consulting company where the founders can make $200,000-$300,000 a year? Really looking at all of that and then figuring out, okay, here's what we're going to go do. Here's what we're going to go build.
and have to applaud asking the right questions. Those are in-depth, outside of the box, formation, where are we growing type discussions. And I don't
Right.
always hear them to that level. And we work with a volume of startups. It sounds like you were very intentional about the growth and what you're going to be switching up from there. And then any tips towards scale that you have for listeners? I know you've shared with me some of the user numbers and some of the scale you guys have hit, been involved in different blockchain AI projects in the
Right.
past with IBM.
Right.
What findings have you had? What recommendations can you have towards that type of achievement, towards that type of growth of scale?
Yeah, I mean, it comes in waves, right? You can't build the perfect machine that's going to scale indefinitely on day one, right? And we tried to do that, and that was one of the reasons we kind of pooped the bed very early on. Was we tried to build this really glorious machine, and it took us way too long. And by the time we launched, it was too late, and users weren't using it. Here was my recommendation: build things that don't scale. Do not think about scalability at all from the onset. Figure out what you're going to go build and test it. Build it quickly, test it cheaply, listen to your users. So, some of the things that we did very early on, like we launched a marketplace. When you click that buy button, all that happened was a bunch of emails shot around in the back end, and guys were up till 3 o'clock in the morning printing out UPS labels, and I was even shipping orders. Okay, it worked a little bit. And users were retaining. We said, okay, now we can start to scale this out a little bit. So then we integrated with UPS. So the shipping labels got generated instantaneously. We integrated with Stripe so that we could take credit card payments versus having to send invoices manually and taking PayPals and Zelles and Venmos, right? So, how it worked with us was that, we build quickly and we test and we was like, okay, what are the limits of this business? With the current systems and the processes that we have in place, we are going to hit a $200,000 cap in the month. All right, that's fine. Let's hit that. And then figure out where we're stuck. What are the things that we need to go build for and optimize to de-bottleneck and get to this next wave of growth? So for us, scale wasn't building this beautiful machine from day one. It was building things that didn't scale, figuring out when we were about to cap out or when we were capped out, to be honest with you, what were the things that were bottlenecking us, building and solving for those one or two or three things, riding the next wave, right? And usually what happens was GMV or sales would 3x every wave. So we went from 0 to 40,000 a month, and we're like, oh wow, okay, here's all the things that we need to go fix. And then we went from 40,000 to 200,000 a month, and we just realized, okay, here are the other things that we need to go fix. And now we're going to go from 200 to maybe north of 1 million in the next few months. And that's really how scale was. It's like you keep riding these waves and figuring out what's blocking you. And hopefully by the end of it, you've been able to then build the platform that is that big, glorious thing that you initially conceived on day one, but it took you several waves and iterations to get there. So that's how I think about scale.
And it's obviously been working very well for you guys, building cheap, testing fast, talking to users, having your goals set. Once you're hitting that cap, once you're knowing, hey, we can't take it further, doing things the way that they are, let's build the next path up, the next goal. And that's how you've been able to hit these large milestones across the way here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just knowing where your blockers are, right? We constantly ask ourselves, the number one question we ask ourselves on every team meeting is, where are you blocked? What's blocking you? That's the first question we ask every team member on all our daily stand-ups. Where are you blocked? Only then can you understand, okay, what's lowest impact, highest priority? And we literally have a quadrant, and we can pluck out, okay, that's the thing we're going to go solve for today. And that's how we kind of think about scale and how we go solve for this thing.
Lowest impact. Hearing about these quadrants, hearing about the team, hearing about how you guys are tackling this all together and removing any of the blockers, it's going to be exciting to see Want to Grow later this year, in the years to come. And Rick, as we start to wrap things up here, any final thoughts that you want to leave listeners with, viewers? And what would be the best way for them to find Wanted, get in touch with you, with your team, as we begin to close down the discussion?
Final thoughts. A lot of people are going to tell you no. I keep a spreadsheet of everyone that's told me no, and it's into the hundreds. You got to learn to take a punch. This is a fight. You got to learn to take the punch. You got to throw the punch. Just don't stay down. That's the only difference between people who make it and who don't make it. The people who made it stood up. So take the punch. You're going to get knocked down. Stand up, no matter what. So that's my closing kind of thought there. It's just you got to be resilient. You got to have thick skin. How you can get in contact with us, Get Wanted, GETWANTD, getwanted.com. The website is up. Our app is available on both iOS and Android. Download us, check us out, join one of the live shows, pop in. If you need some dope shoes, come check us out. Let us know what sizes you are. We'll make sure we got something good for you. And then you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Ricky Nariani, and we'll pop the link in with this podcast somewhere, I'm sure. But getwanted.com, wanted, WANTD, right here. You can see the logo available on the app stores, iOS and Android today.
Boom. You heard it here. Ricky, thank you so much for taking the time to hop on. I want to thank listeners as well, too. I was on the edge of my seat with your story, from your father driving taxis, buying your first Jordans, from your success in the finance world and realizing, nope, working with my passions, to all the inner workings of One and how you guys have been able to refine, enhance the product. I appreciate it. I know I'm going to get a lot of good feedback from listeners. So thank you again for hopping on with us today.
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Ricky. We'll see everybody next time. Take care.